I'm already on the stage. Very easy. Good setup. It's an honor to be here today. I'll wait for everyone to swivel. Representing Elemental, so thank you so much to the business plan for inviting us. I'm also honored to be next to the Tillamook Baby Loaf VW bus here. I've been asking the Elemental board for a green Elemental Tesla Model S. Have not gotten one yet, but I can point to this and say, hey, Tillamook's got one, Elemental. So we'll see where that goes. All right, so Elemental is a startup here in Portland. I think a lot of folks are probably familiar with Intel, so it's kind of tough to follow a company of that kind of impact on our local community. But Elemental's worked hard to build a similarly growing, fast company here. And I want to start by giving you a quick background on Elemental, because while most folks are probably familiar with Intel, I doubt you know what Elemental does. We build multi-screen video processing software. So we take video that was originally destined for delivery over a conventional linear system, say a cable or over-the-air broadcast, a direct-to-home satellite, or IPTV. We take that video and we transform it so it can be delivered over the internet, over any kind of IP connection, to the plethora of multi-screen devices that are out there today. So if you've ever watched HBO Go, for example, on your Xbox 360 or your iPad or your Android device or your computer, that video was produced and procured by Elemental. And we power that for a variety of different customers all over the world. Another example that we like to point to is the 2012 London Summer Games, where Elemental streamed the 24 live events continuously, so all the different events that were going on at any given time, to 77 countries around the world. Over 500 million consumers watched the Olympics on streams that Elemental created. And so when Mo Farah and Galen Rupp went 1-2 in the 10,000, there were probably 100 million people watching that on Elemental-powered devices. So that's what we do at a very high level in a nutshell. Now, a few stats on where we are today. We're in year 7 of the company. In that time, we've raised $29.6 million of venture capital in 3 rounds. And I can't resist this. I hope you laugh. Our version of tax certainty is raising money from venture capitalists and then running net operating losses year after year, which gives you tax certainty because you don't pay tax until you start making a profit, which we're a few years away from doing. But we're making headway there, and it's a lot easier than working with the legislature on tax certainty. We have over 300 customers today. It took us about 4 years to build the core product, and in 2010 we started selling it, so we've closed those 300 customers in just over 3 years now. We've generated about $60 million in cumulative revenue. My clicker is not advancing. There we go. $60 million in cumulative revenue from our customers around the world in that time. And we're definitely a traded sector company, as of that $60 million, only about $500,000 is from customers here in Oregon. They're great customers like OPB and Oregon State University and many others, but it's a very, very small percentage of our revenue and dwindling as a percentage all the time. We have 140 employees, about 100 located right here in downtown Portland at Broadway and Oak. And 11 offices now, 10 international around the world. So we've extended internationally very rapidly. About 50% of our revenue in 2012 came from the international offices, and we expect that to grow significantly in 2013. And then finally, while the company was very small for a long time, something I've been very happy to see is that Elemental employees have really focused on giving back to their community in the ways they can. So we have over 1,600 hours of community involvement, which is a relatively small number in the scheme of things. We've doubled every year since we started the program in 2010. But at a startup, everyone's already working a lot of hours per week. So this is time on top of an already 60, 70, 80-hour-a-week job, and I'm very proud of our employees for taking the time to do so. So that said, I feel like we're off to a solid start as a startup here in Oregon. But one thing I like to do to kind of keep it in perspective, which is very, very important, there's a lot of hype around startups and technology in general. In the first 7 years, I always compare us to Tektronix, which is the great-great-grandfather of Elemental and the technology sector here in Oregon. And if you look at Tek's revenue in their first 7 years, they got to about $7 million in revenue by year 7, which was 1954, I believe. Elemental, in our first 7 years, last year we did about $21.1 million in revenue. So you think, yeah, we're doing pretty good compared to Tektronix. Then you adjust it for inflation, as Joe Courtwright would insist we do, and you see that Tek, by year 7, was almost a $50 million company adjusted for inflation. So we've got a really long way to go to be on that kind of growth curve. And then, of course, looking for the future, Tek continued to grow year after year for the next many decades. And adjusted for inflation, they hit a peak of almost $3 billion at their height, 24,000 Oregon employees. So while I think companies like Elemental are off to a good start, and we have many brethren in the startup community here around the state, to kind of match what some of the companies in the past here in Oregon have done, we've got a really long way to go, and I think it's very important to keep that in mind when we're celebrating some of these early successes. All right, so why Oregon? Not you, as my wife thought it said when she read that quickly. Why Oregon? Why are we here? And I really can point to three key reasons. The first is I grew up here in Portland, Oregon, born and raised. This is my elementary school, Dunaway Elementary in southeast Portland. I think if you look at what Portlanders did when they invested in schools 100 years ago, was they built amazing structures. I mean, the fact that I went to elementary school there at a building like that is unbelievable. And I had a huge variety of extracurricular opportunities. I started taking band in 3rd grade. I was in art classes the whole time through. There was very special tag programs. It was a heck of a diversified education. I went to Selwood Middle School in southeast Portland as well for my middle school years. And then finished up, my family moved to Lake Ridge High School in 1990. And Lake Oswego had phenomenal schools as well. So as a student here, graduating in 1994, the educational dollars that Oregon invested in me as a student not only gave me this broad range of skills, STEM as well as a variety of other extracurriculars, but also really invested a kind of civic engagement in me. And I think wanting to come back to Oregon, I went to school on the East Coast and then grad school in California. I always knew I wanted to come back to Oregon, and that was not ever a choice. So that's the first thing, a great public investment in myself personally and many, many other elementals. Second, Elemental is incredibly fortunate to be part of the video cluster family tree here in Oregon and the Portland region. So again, Tektronix is the great-great-grandfather. Tech spun off a variety of companies. The one that directly led to Elemental was Planar Systems, which built the electroluminescent displays. Planar led to Infocus getting founded and building a great company doing LCD projectors. Infocus spun off a company called Pixelworks, which was where I actually worked prior to founding Elemental. And Infocus, all the co-founders of Pixelworks, there were 5 co-founders, came from Infocus and had learned everything about building LCD projectors from their time at Infocus and could go start a company to build chips to do so. Well, we were very, very fortunate at Elemental in that I graduated from college, went to Pixelworks, and learned how video systems work, as did my other 2 co-founders. And not only did we get that training and kind of understanding of what you need to do to build a strong video company, Pixelworks actually invested $200,000 in Elemental when we were getting started. And that made us not have to worry nearly as much about things like rent, buying the first few computers, getting the first few cloud accounts, that sort of thing. And so that investment over the years has been incredibly valuable to us. And I don't know if we would have been able to start without it. The other thing that Pixelworks did, frankly, was went public and had a great exit. And there were a lot of folks at Pixelworks that made a decent amount of money. I was obviously an early level engineer, but I made enough money when Pixelworks went public to feel okay about quitting and starting a company and knowing that I wouldn't have a salary for a couple years. And so that wealth creation virtuous cycle that you can get going is really critical. And my biggest hope at Elemental is that we have a good, successful progress as a company, and we enable a lot of talented engineers and marketing people and accountants and everyone else to go out and found companies if they have great ideas after Elemental. So that family tree has been critical to our foundation here. Then finally, the third key is really one that John Carter might disagree with me slightly on. But this is a user interface from one of our competitors. When we started the company, we knew what the market was like. This is a user interface that you could probably figure out how to use to control a bunch of video processing systems. If you were a PhD in video processing and then you studied the manual for 3 months, and you'd be able to set it down and sit down and actually set it up. So that's how the state of the art was when Elemental was founded. We took that same UI for a similar product. Of course, Elemental's is much better, but in general, the UI is completely changed. This you can sit down with and get up and running in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes after you've installed your servers. And so we leverage graphic design and aesthetic talents that we have here in spades in Portland. We have multiple UI, UX, and graphic designers on staff, and they're really easy to find world-class artists, really, here in Portland. And so the fact that we have both the technical talent as well as the artistic talent here is incredibly valuable for a company in technology these days because the user interface and user experience is as important as the underlying core technology. So those are the 3 kind of main reasons Elementals thrived here in Oregon. Now, our challenge. It's different than a lot of companies in the region face, and it's all around recruiting world-class talent. As folks have mentioned, we don't have enough engineers being grown here in Oregon today, so we have to recruit them from all over the state, all over the country, and all over the world. And what we've really found at Elemental, and I think a lot of startups find this, is that a world-class engineer is not just 10 or 20% more productive than a standard engineer, it's actually an order of magnitude or a 10x more productive than a standard engineer. And so finding world-class people to work at the company is really the only way that we can compete with companies with vast resources relative to us. And so we spend a lot of time selling Oregon, selling the story of why you come to live here to work at Elemental, because we only recruit a few folks from in-state. And so I have a couple ideas on how the state can help Elemental solve this challenge, this recruiting challenge, which really is the #1 issue we face. One is doing an effective job of marketing the advantages we have here. Our beaches don't all have signs like this one that don't allow public usage. We have incredible public lands across the state in all different regions, and they're very accessible from anywhere in Portland or the other cities around the state. Our traffic problems have been mitigated pretty dramatically by terrific investments in biking and public transportation and pedestrian-friendly walkways. At Elemental, 85% of the trips to the company are not in a single occupancy vehicle. A lot of bikers, a lot of transit. That investment is what people want to move to. They do not want to sit in traffic an hour a day each way. They want to take the bus, take the bike, get there easily. And then finally, the beautiful thing about Oregon is that we don't consider going to a strip mall the best entertainment within a 30-minute radius. We have incredible parks, we have great culture, we have the Portland Center Stage, the Oregon Ballet Theater. We have an amazing place to live here. And I think really promoting this quality of life in detail, broadly, will help us sell the region and get the knowledge workers that we need here to Oregon. The final key I want to talk about is mitigating risk in potential recruits' mind. We spend a lot of time doing this. They may be excited about coming to work for Elemental, but it's the only company they've heard of, or maybe Intel and Elemental, but that's it. We have to work really hard to let them know that if they move their family to Portland, if they move their family to Oregon, and Elemental goes out of business because of those losses I referred to earlier, that there'll be a lot of great companies they can go to afterwards. And so mitigating risk in potential candidates' minds is absolutely critical, and that's something where all of us can talk about the business environment here and the great companies we're building here. Techtown Portland Video is something that the startup companies in Portland worked on together to try to help do that, and it's already been fairly successful with some of the folks that have moved to Portland since we put it out. All right, so in conclusion, in my opinion, take it what it's worth. I don't know how much people paid to get in here today, but it was free for me. There's 3 reasons we are here. The great public education system that we had in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. Successful clusters willing to invest in the next generation, and the unique nexus of technical and artistic talent that we have right here for free. The challenge is recruiting world-class talent. And to solve that, we need to recommit to investing in education. We've made some great strides here in Portland by passing the bond last year, and the compromise that the legislature and the governor came to in the special session a couple months ago was a big step forward, but it is just the start. Not only does it help us train that next generation, but it also is a key selling tool to people that are moving to Portland. They can come see the beautiful schools and the great teachers and know that their kids are going to have an excellent experience. We need to market Oregon's strengths effectively. It's not just the quality of life, but it's the details underlying that. Why is the quality of life so good here? It's not just biking, it's not just Stumptown, it's this variety of benefits that we have and that we've invested in an innovative way over the past 4 decades. And finally, mitigate the risk factors in their minds. Let's tell the story of companies that are doing great work here, so people that are thinking about moving here aren't concerned about losing their job and not having anywhere to go. So that's my talk. I'd say time to execute Oregon. I think we have a great opportunity to do so, and with the software cluster's growth, I think the next couple of decades are only going to be very, very bright ones for this region. Thank you very much.